Must be your skin I'm sinking in. Must be for real, 'cause now I can feel I didn't mind. It's not my kind, not my time to wonder why everything is gone white, everything is gray. Now you're here, now you're away. Don't want this, remember that. I'll never forget where you're at. Don't let the days go by, glycerine, glycerine. I'm never alone, I'm alone all the time. Are you at one? Do you lie? We live on a wheel where everyone steals, and when we rise it's like strawberry fields. Treated you bad, you bruised my face. Couldn't love you more, you've got a beautiful taste. Don't let the days go by. Could have been easier on you. I couldn't change, so I wanted to. Should have been easier by 3. Our old friend Fear and you and me. Glycerine. Don't let the days go by, glycerine. Don't let the days go by, glycerine. I needed you more, you wanted us less. You could not kiss, just regrets. Just might be clear, simple and plain. Well, that's just fine, it's just one of my names. Don't let the days go by. Could have been easier on you. You. Glycerine. 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 Well, guys, welcome back as always. This is a very serious channel where we discuss very serious things. And we play very serious songs in very serious ways. It's nice to see you guys. Can you hear me? Hopefully you. If I sang that entire song and the mic was not on, like I did the other day, I would be very upset. But it looks like we're fine. So, hey guys, let's see who's here today. Man, there's a lot of folks here. This is what I get, man. When I set the stream up like 45 minutes early, people actually find it. That is so weird. Hey, Boyd, Hugh, Swamp Cabbage, Dana. Dana, I like that video you sent me. Dana sent me a video. You know what? Here. This is great. Dana's dog loves me. How you see, like leaning here, buddy. Oh man, it is the best. Thank you very much for that, Dana. That's good dog. Good dog. That is so cute. They don't know that I like plants more than I like animals. They don't even know. So sad. So hey, Dana, thank you. And Hugh and Scott, Alan, Tiki, Carolyn, Skippy, Dan, Tina. Oh, I'm not gonna miss anybody. Hey, Christopher. Red Short Bus. Nice. Welcome. So let us get into this thing. Hey Mars, nice to see you back again. Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey Lane from Missouri. And Natasha. Into Canada, welcome back, man. Original Crispy. Hey man. Samantha. Samantha from Central Texas. Mars sends a super chat and says, which benefits you more, being subscribed on YouTube, being a patron, or subscribing to unauthorized.tv? I can do two, but not all three. I would say unauthorized is the best of all of them. YouTube is nice. Patreon is fine, but unauthorized is the that is the most open free speech platform out of all of them, so I would rather support them. I actually get the same amount whether you are subscribed on YouTube or subscribed on unauthorized. It's just that YouTube currently has a better setup and a better interface than unauthorized does. So unauthorized is in the middle. It's being worked on, and I have a bunch of videos over there that I don't have here, but I haven't been able to work on it as easily as I have been able to work on YouTube. So unauthorized is catching up, but by far that's my favorite of the three platforms. Samantha says, I can never get unauthorized to let me see anything, though I subscribed. Unauthorized got switched over recently from one set of servers to another set of servers, and a lot of things changed. So try going right back to the front page of unauthorized.tv and then logging in from there and see if you can clear out your cache and everything and see how it goes. Yes, appointments are very flexible in Latin America. So, hello to everybody else here. I know we've got a lot of people in here right now, so let's jump into this so I don't just say hi to all of my friends for the whole rest of this thing. So, well, it's nice to see you. You're reading Galatians. It's one of my favorites, Arch. Doesn't matter, Mars. Whichever you prefer. Go for it. Either way. All right. So let's jump into this. This is a cool topic because it's always cooler beneath the canopy. So yesterday, in the last Goodstream number 140, we talked about basically the outline of a food forest, and I had this nice diagram from where is it? The food forest layers from temperate climate permaculture. This is a very nice one here, and the canopy, the subcanopy, the shrub layer. Today we're going to talk about the subcanopy, but you might as well include the shrub layer in there too, because a lot of us are dealing with backyards and smaller spaces, and there's not really that huge delineation necessarily between what is a shrub and what is a small tree. You know, the Suriname cherry could be considered a shrub, or it could be considered a small tree, depending on how big you let it get. A peach tree can be kept at around the same size as a tall shrub. So it's sort of a continuum. It's not like, all right, all of you guys from here to here, that's definitely a shrub, and all you guys from here to here are your trees. I mean, I have seen trees under stress conditions or with lots of other, lots of pruning or underneath power lines, that sort of thing, behaving more like shrubs. Or you'll see sea grape trees, for those of you who have been along the beaches or have been to tropical climates, you'll see sea grapes. They're really common in the tropics. These sea grape trees that grow along the edge of the shore. Sometimes they're only a few feet tall and they're kind of all bent sideways and short. But there is a sea grape tree growing at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton that's gigantic. It's probably like 40, 50 feet, this great big trunk on it like this. Because it is in a sheltered location and it's not getting the living daylights beat out of it, so it grew much more into a tree form. So the trees and the shrubs, let's just call this the subcanopy / shrubs things. But we're talking about woody shrubs and trees, not the herbaceous stuff, herbaceous whatever. And not the ground covers and not the vines. This is covering the second layer underneath your canopy. So your canopy, I said yesterday, is the poles that hold the tent up. That's how I think of them. You plant these tall canopy trees first, and then beneath them you start to build in the sub-canopy underneath that top tree canopy. So if we go and we look at the South Florida, let's see, not this one, the South Florida food forest. You can see in the background here, right now, in this particular image, in the back left, mostly obscured by candlestick cassia, Senna alata, there are some mango tree branches sticking out. The mango tree branches that you see sticking out there, at this point, they are subcanopy. That's to the far left side. You'll see a few little mango leaves sticking out in between two candlestick cassia plants in the back left. The candlestick cassia in this photo, when the food forest was very young, are canopy. And beneath them, there is subcanopy of mango. This has reversed now. Most of these candlestick cassias, there's hardly anything left of them. And the mango is up taller than that power line in the back, and it is taller than the banana that you see in the center. In this particular setup right here, the canopy is actually the bananas, the candlestick cassias, and the papaya tree over to the far right, and the subcanopy are the cassava that you see in the foreground, the mango that is in the back corner to the left, and then in the foreground to the kind of middle, just slightly to the left, there is a scrubby little sad looking key lime tree, which has never gotten much bigger than that, actually. It's still part of the subcanopy. But if we were to look at this other one, right here, this is mostly subcanopy that you're looking at here. This is a picture of my old North Florida food forest project. This is a picture from about 5 years ago. And up above in the background, you can see some towering trees. Those are water oaks. There's one water oak there to the back right, and then in the center there is a cabbage palm, which, as I said, in more tropical climates, the palms become an emergent layer or a palm layer that kind of just pops out above the canopy and doesn't really shade all that much, so they're not that big a deal. They're not really that much of a pain or a problem or a shade issue because they just make this ball of foliage at the top and they don't spread hugely sideways and make everything go dark. Show you another picture here. This is also subcanopy. You see there is an orange to the right. There is a sumac in the middle, that stick-looking thing. They're never very attractive. Off to the left, there is a loquat tree. And then there's some various things, there's some root beer plants down around the base. There's actually some pawpaws hidden in there and some other stuff. But this is mostly subcanopy, but this is subcanopy that is kind of moving away from the canopy of oaks, and it is acting more like a canopy than a subcanopy. So you can see there's kind of like this, depending on where it is in the thing, it's like what they say about about men. There are alphas, which are like the guy that's always ready to handle everything. He's the born leader. Like you see this guy and he's like, no problem, we're gonna take care of it. And everybody's like, yes, sir. Like they just follow him. He's a born leader. He's the alpha. He's the top. And there's just this type of guy where you're just like, he's probably right. I mean, he seems like he's right. Everybody wants to follow him. He's amazing. Dude, just like, you know, he's the like just the top kind of a guy in the hierarchy. He becomes the CEO, he becomes the president, he becomes the, you know, the team captain, whatever. He's the top guy. But then there's what you would call a situational alpha. This is the guy who would normally be part of a team, part of the system, or whatever else. This is the guy that becomes the unlikely hero. This is the guy that, you know, there's a situation where the building is on fire and the accountant's like, I know how to deal with this. Everybody, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, and we're going to do this. Normally, you don't pay that much attention to the accountant. He's just this normal guy. Hey, Mike. Hey, nice to see you. Good to see you, man. Cool. But in this particular situation, he's the guy that seizes the lead and says, okay, I'm going to, you know, we're going to get everybody out of here. Maybe he is a, you know, a safety expert. You know, accountants are really good at managing all these little details that normal people don't. Maybe he had some, you know, military training in the past or paramedic training or whatever else. So he knows in this particular situation what there is to do when he just jumps in and he fills the position. That would be the situational alpha. So the trees, in certain situations, become either, you know, they're canopy because they're at the top. It doesn't mean that they're naturally canopy trees. If they were in a, you know, a forest situation, they would probably be overshadowed by something else. But when you're building a food forest system, you say, well, your peaches are your canopy. Peaches are not that big. You know, I mean, peaches would be subsumed by massive, you know, massive pecan trees, you know. So as Dana says, bananas wouldn't be a subcanopy layer. Normally, yeah, bananas would not be the canopy. They would fit in around the edges of a larger system because the canopy is usually the tallest trees. So if you get into like the Amazon, you know, some of the trees are 200 feet tall. Yeah, I mean, that's insane. That could be like 2 times a pecan tree or higher. There's one tree. Holy moly, that's a monster. Or the redwoods of California. Those are monster trees. You couldn't even fit them in your food forest. So you have to kind of scale your canopy and your subcanopy according to the space that you have and the trees that you want to grow. So the subcanopy it's changing over time, and from the subcanopy, like the mango in the back corner, let's see here, the mango in the back left corner that is subsumed by the cassias. Those cassias are not big trees, or the senna alata, candlestick cassia. They keep getting bumped back and forth between the sennas and the cassias, so you know, there's more than one Latin name. It's confusing. So those are subcanopy, but they happen to be acting as canopy right now in this situation because they grew faster than the mango. But now the mango, which has a capacity of reaching 60 feet, is way over them. They're gone. They're pushed out. They're like leaning sideways out from underneath the mango if they're growing at all. I haven't checked lately. Let's take a look here at another picture. This was sent to me by Scrubland Avenger today. This is a picture of the front yard of my old food forest system here. Now you can see most of this food forest is like, it's completely shorter trees. You know, it's not really reaching up over maybe 16 feet, most of it. And it looks like the loquat that was there has been taken out. I remember the new owner told me that the loquat just made lousy fruit, so she was going to get rid of it. So it looks like the loquat that would have been in the center of this picture here is gone. And that would have been closer to canopy at this point. It would have been a little taller than the palm tree that's kind of there to the right. And in the background, you can see some stuff going. There's some stuff here and there. There's all kinds of little bits and pieces. But it's mostly what would be quite possibly subcanopy. Now you see in the background, look at that massive, crazy water oak. That's like serious canopy, but I took the water oaks out of my yard, except for a few of them. You could see the edges of one off to the left there in the upper top left, right by the chemtrails. But to the right there, that one is that one is, well, how do I do this? I just gotta, that one right there, it's like a reversed image, it drives me nuts. That one right there is in the neighbor's yard. That's what a serious canopy tree looks like. Everything underneath it is basically subcanopy, but instead, the canopy in this system, there's a magnolia in there, there's a honey locust in there, there's some pears in there, and some other things. Instead, those are acting as the canopy through most of this. They're shorter fruiting trees, and a lot of your fruiting trees that you would want to grow in your yard, anyways, are not gigantic, massive trees. So you're not putting in 200-foot monsters, as Dan S says. The lower layers are sparse under those 200-foot trees in the Amazon, except along the edges. That's right, and that's why, with your food forest, you really want a system that does, really well. If you want a system that does really well, you define and grow those edges. So that's kind of the overview of the canopy and the subcanopy. It's going to change according to your yard size and how you want to design that son of a gun and how you want to grow that thing. And talking about, as we're moving from that, that's just the design note there. If you have created, put in your canopy trees and you're going to put your subcanopy trees around them, like I said yesterday, you don't want to put them super, super close where they're going to get shaded out. But on the other hand, in the early parts of the system, it's really difficult to keep the weeds suppressed and the wild stuff suppressed that wants to get in there, all the vines and bits and pieces, like the folks that wrote me and they're like, look, I got all these invasive plants that are trying to come in and run over everything. Yes, that's part of how it goes. When the gaps are not filled in the system, the weeds and nature will take over. Nature wants to fill in the gaps. That's the idea of a forest. It will fill in itself if you don't fill it in. So you've got to be a little faster. So you've got a few options. When you're putting your subcanopy in, you can put in a few subcanopy trees and then suppress all of the weeds and the vines and all that kind of thing by putting weed block down on the ground. I'm not like plastic, but putting down a whole bunch of cardboard, and then if you can get a huge pile of mulch over all that stuff, that helps. That will suppress the weeds, to get those subcanopy trees growing. And some people will say, well, if you design your food forest correctly, you don't have any problem with weeds because you've filled every single niche in nature. I don't know about you, but I have never been able to properly fill the bindweed niche and keep it from coming back. Or the wild plum niche. They always show up. Stuff shows up. The Biden's alba niche. These things show up. It just is what it is. But if you're able to suppress it, yes, you could suppress it with the weed block and that sort of thing. If you do the island method that I talked about in the previous, one of the previous streams on food forest design, you are building an island. You've got your canopy tree, a couple of subcanopies, some shrubs, some ground cover. You're putting together like a mini food forest, and then a path, and then another little mini piece of food forest. But you only do it as you can bite off what you can chew. Because I'll tell you what, if you go and try to plant a food forest over an acre or two, it could consume your life trying to make it productive and keep all the trees watered and keep all the trees alive and keep all the weeds suppressed, particularly if you have any kind of invasive species showing up in the area. I have a friend who had problems with wisteria and air potatoes just coming in over and over and over again and just strangling and covering things, and she was constantly working from one end of her yard to the other because she had like 3 acres. It was a big deal. And she worked a regular job, a busy job, and she didn't have time to manage all this stuff, so it was always hacking her way through one thing and then moving on to the next one and hoping those trees would get big enough to shrug some of it off and hoping that she could get enough of a head start on some of these invasives that they wouldn't choke things out. So if you move in small controllable sections, like the weeds are not that big a deal in this food forest system here anymore. Let me show you again. They're not that big a deal in, no, not the dogs. I like the dogs, but there we go. They're not that big a deal in this system because you could see the mulched path in between. Down on the ground, those are sweet potatoes for ground cover. There are peaches and beauty berries and wild plums and arrowroots and all kinds of other things in there. But the combination of suppressive ground covers with a good sub-canopy layer providing shade, plus the mulch on the pathways and the regular walking through the pathways really kept a lot of it down. So weeds are not that big a problem. You can see down here in the lower left, there's some little weeds here and there, but they're not that big a deal. You know, it's hard to fight when all that space is filled up, and the Subcanopy does a nice job of shading out as it grows, shading out the bits and pieces that are under your canopy. So your canopy is not big enough to really shade much out yet, but you know, you got your little canopy trees, and you got your little sub-canopy trees, and the more you start to fill the edges in, the less the weeds are a problem, but you really got to beat them at the beginning because the weeds are often more aggressive and will fill those gaps in and make the system just crazy, you know. So the high density at the beginning, like I've talked about, you know, overplant your food forest. This is where a lot of these nitrogen fixing trees come in, and your biomass plants that you're going to chop and drop and all that kind of stuff. Pack a whole bunch of stuff in there, and then just chop it and drop it down, and the chopping and dropping will help suppress the weeds, as will just having the extra competition right at the beginning. So if it's something you know that is not that big a deal to take out later, like you know, something that you're going to chop and drop and eventually it's going to shade out, like mimosa trees or interlobiums or whatever, you know, if they grow back again and again and again, that's actually an asset. So you just keep chopping the tops of them off and throwing them on the ground. Whereas I find the vines are really the most irritating thing that shows up in the food forest. So if you see any vines showing up for bindweed or any kind of nasty invasive skunk vine, what is that horrible stuff? If those things are showing up, rip them out as fast as you can and just mulch that area over and make sure that they don't go to seed, because the seeds can be a big issue. But even if you don't, you know, have any of them in to begin with, you know, watch for them, because birds are pretty good at planting that stuff too. Sometimes things just show up. If you can get that density at the beginning, just lots and lots of cover. Like if you planted the entire thing with nitrogen fixers, as you could see with the, you know, the candlestick cassias growing over the top of the mango, those just needed to be fed to the mango. It was no big deal. They got fed to the mango, and now the mango is bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's nothing that's going to run over that mango now. But if you have a high enough density of all those quick growing nitrogen fixing species that are really easy to just come through and chop down and throw down as mulch, that'll help keep other stuff from coming in that you really don't want. And as for was my sumac poison sumac? No, it was winged sumac. Not poison sumac. I don't want poison sumac in there. I had enough problems with the poison ivy, I had to keep ripping it out. I'm not particularly allergic to poison ivy, so I would pick it out by hand very carefully and then throw it on the driveway to dry out until it was totally dried out, and then I would compost it, or I would just burn it. But I didn't want the kids getting in it. It's nasty. Not that bad. I did plant a tung oil tree in the food forest. The tung oil has a fruit that looks like it would be edible, but it's actually poisonous, so it's kind of cool to put it in there. Don't eat it. It'll varnish your insides. Another thing with the Subcanopy, if you're not really sure how you want to plan your system out, don't worry about it that much. Plant your canopy trees, start sticking in Subcanopy stuff. You know, you go and you see that nectarines are on sale for 10 bucks a tree. Oh, go buy 3 of them. Stick them in there somewhere. Put them in a sunny spot. Don't worry that much. You know, the paths will develop even if you don't have your paths properly planned. I used to just back when it was mostly lawn and a few trees stuck in it. I would just take the mower and I would mow these meandering paths here and there and leave the rest of the grass to grow. Like I would be done mowing in 10 minutes because I would just mow an interesting winding path through all the grass and weeds around the trees. There's a nice little path. Put a little path over here. And then the kids would run through the paths because the weeds were like, you know, almost chest high on a kid. And that was kind of cool because it, you know, it made it look like it was designed in a way. There was a path there. But if you just are sticking in your Subcanopy stuff here and there, you'll find ways to walk around it. You'll find places where you like to walk. And then you just don't plant anything more in those areas that you like to walk. Or if you've planted something in a spot where you don't like it, either dig it up and transplant it in the early spring or late winter, or just chop it down and feed it to something else. You know, if you have your own backyard plant nursery going, if you're starting your own stuff from seeds and cuttings and air layers, do it. You know, let the pads develop and then just see what happens. And another thing, you know, I talked about the birds planting stuff. The birds will plant stuff all through your food forest system. Some of it's going to be useful, some of it's not. When you see a plant growing and you don't know what it is, see if you can figure it out before you just yank it out. I had some sort of a weed, something in the aster family, that would get almost as tall as me, and it had little fluffy white blooms on it and kind of raggedy green leaves about this big. I don't know that I ever properly identified what it was, but it popped up in one edge. And I just looked at it, I was like, well, that's kind of cool. It must have blown in with the wind or a bird dropped it or something. I mean, it's just like this weedy thing, but I was like, well, it's not in a spot where I have anything else growing, so I'll just let it grow. So it grew and it grew and it grew, and then it burst into bloom, and it had all these white blooms on it. And it turns out those blooms attracted more bees and butterflies. I mean, the thing, they always had butterflies all over it. It had monarchs on it and zebra longwings and stuff. I was like, wow, that's cool. I didn't even know what it was. It was just like, it was just serendipity. You know, it happened to be something that showed up in the system and it was cool. You don't know, you get these happy little accidents. So, great. Yeah, you know, I didn't pull it out. And the next year it grew back again, the next year it grew back again. Cool, took that corner up. I had beauty berries show up in the system, which are a really common North Florida native plant. They're somewhat edible, kind of grainy and mealy, but my kids used to like to eat them. Birds will eat them sometimes, not very much. But they're just sort of a neat plant, and if I didn't like where one was, I chopped it up and I fed it to something else. But it wasn't really invasive, it just kind of filled a gap. Okay, fill the gap up, you look nice. It was a pretty plant, pretty looking, really just these weird purple clusters of berries. Calicarpa americana, I think it is. Really a cool plant. But I didn't plant it, not on purpose. I had more sumac show up all over the place. I didn't plant them, birds planted them. I had black cherries, flatwoods plum, Chickasaw plum. I also had oaks pop up here and there. I had sweet gum pop up. The sweet gum I would pollard, chop the tops of them off and pollard it, and if they were in a really bad spot, I'd just cut them down completely, but I pollarded some of them and used them for yam poles. Hey, you're here? Great, I'll put you to work. The Chickasaw plums I could graft on top of. I grafted nectarine and peaches on top. I had bought one, but it started to sucker and spread all over the place, so I would just pick suckers in locations where I liked them, and I would graft on top of them. Now, the peaches and nectarines grew way faster than the Chickasaw plum rootstock, Prunus angustifolia. So, Prunus persica grows like twice as fast, much thicker, more vigorous, much larger leaves, but the Prunus angustifolia was tiny little leaves, kind of sour fruit, you know, good for animals. You could make a pretty good jam out of it. It wasn't a great fruit though, but I could graft on top of it. And so it was like a universal rootstock. I grafted beautiful Japanese plums on it. I grafted nectarines and I grafted peaches all in the spring on serendipitous shoots. And the cool thing about that is that peaches, nectarines, and Japanese plums all suffer greatly from nematode issues in Florida. It tends to sap their vigor. They have a lot of issues. Well, the native plum is really scrappy. Grows in hot sand, hardly cares. It can take terrible conditions. You see them growing alongside railroad tracks and in terrible dirt. Well, they can grow and their roots can thrive in those conditions. And guess what? When you graft on top of them, now you have peaches, plums, nectarines growing without having to worry about the nematodes. Cool. You know? It was like the natural rootstock. Now, of course, the downside is that since the Chickasaw plum is this weedy, shrubby little thing, not a very big tree, the support for the cyanwood that I grafted on, like the peach would be like this big around, the scion part would be like this big around, and the part that I was grafted onto would be this big around, so it would go like this. You know, that was pretty funny looking, and the grafts tended to fall over, so I would just prop them up with poles. You know, I just hammered pieces of conduit in the ground and tied them to it, and they did just fine. But I got great plums off of a Chickasaw plum rootstock from a Japanese plum that I grafted on top. So sometimes the birds plant things, and then you could say, hey, this looks kind of useful. You know, identify what it is first. Is it a native persimmon? Did you get a persimmon in there? Is it a hickory? You might want to keep a hickory. I don't know. You want to eat a hickory? A black walnut back in the corner? Okay, that's cool. You know, before you immediately just go, oh, that I didn't plant that, and then you eliminate it, you just kind of see what happens, because this is a dynamic, evolving system. The forest is not going to come out the way you expected it to begin with, and nature wants to help you plant that forest. Some of the stuff that shows up is not going to be good. Some of the stuff that shows up will be good. So, you know, work with what shows up. And if it's something wild that you can graft something, you know, good or edible onto, well, great. You know, go for it. You had some seedling mulberries show up. Graft a better variety on top of it. Skip the juvenile phase of the mulberry. Whether it's a male or a female, you can graft scion wood from a good fruiting mulberry on top of it, and it will make fruit. And, you know, so don't immediately just scorch earth things. And another thing that happens once you have your canopy, those canopy trees really, they take the brunt of the sun and the wind and the freezing weather. They really are, you know, they're the top of the system, and yeah, they take up a lot of resources and they shade things beneath them, but they also provide a microclimate. They increase the level of moisture that's in the ground beneath by pumping up lots of water, some of which they don't use themselves. They will drop leaves on the ground, and they will encourage fungal growth. There's a lot of things that start to happen as the trees grow larger and larger and take over. So your canopy's taking over. Your subcanopy trees are sheltered in part by the action of the canopy above. And I really, really noticed this with more cold sensitive trees growing beneath oak canopy and around other trees that were larger than they were. Just having a little bit of cover between them and the night sky at night made a big difference. Like the orange tree that was planted a little ways out from the oak canopy froze and cracked, destroyed the tree when it was young. It got colder than I expected one night, froze, and it killed the tree. One that I had growing just under the canopy of the oak wasn't even touched. Pretty amazing. But it creates a microclimate. There's a cushion, you know, and the tree itself, the trunk of a tree is filled with water, which acts as thermal mass too. So it creates these microclimates. Like right now, if I were to go back to my old food forest and plant in some more tropical, subtropical plants, they would do pretty well. I would have a pretty good chance of success on keeping some things alive that I would not have had if I had tried to plant them in the bare lawn that I first started with. Having some canopy, having all of that warm air trapped on a freezing night, slowing down the cold winds and the flow of frost, keeping them from, baking heat and then freezing nights, having that community of plants already in place allows you to put more into the subcanopy over time. So you may start with some trees that you're like, I know this is a dead ringer tree. I know this one will absolutely do well in my subcanopy. Apples grow really well here. So you put apples in. But then you're like, I wonder if I could get away with a Japanese persimmon or if it's too cold. Well, once you have a few apple trees and you have some canopy, and some of the colder winds are being blocked and things aren't quite so brutal, you might get away with it. You might get away with stuff that you didn't think you could get away with, like the Natal plum, Carissa macrocarpa. Carissa macrocarpa is technically a zone 10 plant. It grows in South Florida. But I got one and I put it into the food forest like a year or so before I left. And I put it in an area where it had some shelter from different shrubs. And I figured, well, if we get a freezing night, it's going to be mostly protected from the worst of it. And it can grow out of this area and reach as much light as it wants, but if it freezes back, it's probably not going to freeze back all the way because it's planted kind of in this sheltered little nook. Sure enough, it grew, did well through the summer, and then we got some freezing nights. It got a little bit of burn on the edges of its leaves, but it was fine. So I'm pretty certain that you could get away with pushing at least a zone more once your subcanopy is starting to fill in. You start with the stuff that's like the sure bets, and then you start tucking in the bits and pieces around them that are maybe not sure bets, because you have a microclimate, you have the fungal community, you have the forest floor of all the nitrogen fixers that you're dropping into the ground and everything. And you may be able to get away with stuff that you didn't think you could grow. Now at the same time, it's a double-edged sword, because if the canopy and the subcanopy really fill in too much, you can end up with too much shade. So a lot of shade is good when it comes to freezing nights and keeping the warm air in and keeping the cold from getting as bad as it possibly could. And early in the spring, when everything's bursting into bloom, it's good to have a little bit of cover to keep it in case you get a late frost. But when it comes to the growing season, you don't really want that much cover because they really need that sunshine to make fruit. So it's a double-edged sword, and you're going to have to play around with it and try to maintain a forest edge, have it a little bit tucked in. It's like when you just put the covers maybe up to your waist because you're sort of half warm and half cold. It's not, if you put the covers all the way up to your neck, you're going to be too hot. But if you don't cover your legs, you're not going to be able to sleep. It's like that. You're going to figure it out over time what's comfortable in the system and what's really going to thrive and what's not. And picking the right plants for the subcanopy is a good thing to do. Like, pick the stuff that you know is going to work first, and then of course experiment, because things that you don't think could happen may happen. For example, the Florida soap nut tree. Now I know I talk a lot about Florida, so for those of you that are out of Florida, I'm sorry for that. It's I have to talk where most of my experience is, but you can take the concepts away without using these specific plants. But the Florida soap nut tree, Sapindus saponaria, according to the University of Florida, is a zone 10 tree, which means it's basically a true tropical tree. It might touch freezing. Touching freezing won't kill it, but any amount of time below freezing is probably going to kill it. So if you just read that, you'd be like, well, I guess I can't grow that in my yard. Not so fast. Chiappini Native Farm and Nursery in Melrose, Florida, which is 5 hours north of the alleged only natural range of Sapindus saponaria, has multiple soap nut trees growing out in an area that is not inside of the city. It's not a particularly protected microclimate, but they have a few trees that are growing beautifully. Beautiful, tall, gorgeous trees that have sailed through a decade of winters, including some down to low teens, which means basically they are growing in zone 8 or at the edge of zone 8. So yes, experimentation sometimes people don't know the actual range of a plant because they haven't planted enough of them, or they haven't planted seedlings, because some seedlings may be more cold tolerant than others. You don't really know. Just like you're not exactly sure where the canopy and the subcanopy begin and where the shrub layer goes. It's part of the fun. So, you know, start a bunch of trees and overplant. Fill that subcanopy layer in around your canopy trees. Make sure that they don't overcompete with the canopy trees, but also you want to make sure that they're suppressing the potential weed issues that could be coming through. And then you just roll with it. You let the system evolve and you see what happens, knowing that a lot of your subcanopy might eventually disappear. That's fine. You know, or maybe you're going to have to cut your canopy back somewhat to let your subcanopy thrive. You just go with it. From year to year, you chop something down, you move something, you ignore this, you add this, you cut this down. It's a forest. You're just actively managing the forest for the parts of it you like. So if you've got something that pops up and you really like it, just clear the other stuff around it and feed them to it, you know, and see what happens. And that subcanopy is also going to do a nice job of kind of filling in around your canopy trees as they grow, keeping the ground cooler, dropping some biomass, hopefully, and hopefully you're putting in a bunch of support species. You might be putting in Mexican sunflowers, Jerusalem artichokes, gummy berries, sea buckthorn, Siberian pea shrub. A lot of stuff that has multiple uses is good. You know, if you can eat it, but it's also a good chop and drop, that's great. There's a tree that is common in Australia, the Australian pine. They call it in Florida, but I think in Australia it's called she oak, Casuarina species. They're a good chop and drop. They're a good lumber tree. They're an invasive in Florida, but that's because they're a nitrogen fixer that's not actually leguminous, and they fill in a ecological niche that is not filled by much of anything else. So if you had them, chop them and drop them and use them, and you make, get them for firewood. There's a lot of uses. You can, get firewood out of it over and over again. It's the best firewood in the world. It's the best burning wood in the world. Casuarina, the she oak. But as you pack those things in, hack your paths through now and again. Make it a jungle. Somebody said the other day, call it a food jungle. Coin the phrase. Make it work. And then inside of that canopy, your subcanopy might be something as small as blackberries and blueberries, raspberries, gooseberries, those sorts of things. If you have a smaller yard, your canopy tree might be an apple. Your canopy tree might be a loquat. Your canopy tree might be a pomegranate. And then around it, you have some figs that you keep pruned. Or less than that, maybe you've got bananas as the canopy and your subcanopy is cassava. It's going to depend on the what you have. But the idea is plant some of the tall stuff, plant some of the shorter stuff around it. These are long-term perennials mixed in with as many support species as you want to add. If you like butterflies, put some butterfly plants in there. If your kids, want to raise bees, put some bee plants in there. Put in all kinds of bits and pieces around them, and anything that strikes your fancy, throw it in there and see how it works. I've said before that I'm not a fan of, like, I'm going to figure out which plant likes which plant and plant that with that. I'm a fan of throwing a whole bunch of plants together and seeing how they get along. I used to enjoy throwing parties where I would invite people that had completely different ideas from different walks of life, and then just put them together and give them drinks. That was entertaining. So I had a Jewish liberal friend and a conservative friend, and this guy did this crazy thing. Like, this guy is a writer, this guy's a carpenter, this guy's just basically a drunk. We'll put them all together and then invite a pastor. Like I have a friend who is a Catholic, and I go to a Lutheran church. And then I also met the priest for a Russian Orthodox church, and I thought, I have a plan for a very entertaining evening. All we got to do is invite the local imam and the and a rabbi, and we can have a fantastic evening. Let's see what happens. It's exciting, you know. Just don't do it on my YouTube channel, or I'll ban you. Anyhow, I'm just kidding. The throwing all the plants together into the subcanopy and seeing what happens is part of the fun, and then of course seeing what nature does. And then you like this thing? Hey, I want some more of that. I'm gonna graft them. I'm gonna propagate them. I'll stick a few more in. That particular mulberry, I don't like it that much. I'll graft on top of it, or I'll cut it down and I'll feed it to something else. No big deal. You could start a dozen mulberry cuttings in probably 20 minutes work. No big deal. Just keep rolling. And we will cover vines and ground cover next time. I'll probably do a vines and ground cover together in the next Food Forest Talk as we continue this exciting and useful series on food forest design. I hope it gives you guys some ideas. It's really, don't be too uptight about your designs. Throw stuff out there. Nature wants to make a forest. If there are forests growing in your area and that was naturally what was there before you bought your yard, nature wants to make a forest again. That's the climax ecology of your area. She's going to work with you. You just got to start planting and filling the holes and see what happens. Fill in the canopy, fill in the subcanopy, put in the vines, all kinds of good stuff. So now I will get to the super chats here and answer questions. It's funny, the other day somebody was like, dude, you have a lot of good info and I like your channel, but dude, your videos are, I'm not gonna watch an hour and a half long video. I said, it's not the same as my videos. I don't smash things on my Goodstreams. That's the difference. Now there's a difference between the live experience and the regular the regular video, which is produced just to give you a particular thing. Because I can answer questions here, we can talk, we can do the super chat thing, and I can catch people as they throw things my way, and we can interact with each other. It's totally different, you know. So let me see here if I can figure out. I know we have some super chats here, and I want to make sure I get to them. Okay, so I answered Mars, unauthorized first, and then Patreon or YouTube. Patreon probably is a higher payout, so I'm gonna amend that and say unauthorized, then Patreon. I don't do much on Patreon though. I tend to mostly just believe I should sell books. Patreon somehow strikes me as like e-begging or something, but I try to make it worthwhile. I don't do much with it, but I appreciate the support anyways. Lou sends a 1999 super chat and says, yo David, groundhog was trapped and relocated. The saga of the groundhog. The saga of Lou's groundhog continues. Will the groundhog take the bait? What is the bait? Will he go into this trap? Does this trap have a heart? Or is it a trap that will break Lou's conscience? Okay, well the groundhog was trapped and relocated. Was he relocated underneath a tree? Ha! Cantaloupe did the trick. Look, I would climb into a have-a-heart trap for a cantaloupe. I'm gonna just guess it's a have-a-heart trap, not one of those bear traps, because there's not much to relocate if you get one of those. Carry on and have a good night. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the super chat. That's fun. The saga of the groundhog continues. MH says, is Ailanthus a good chop and drop tree? I don't even know what that is. You have stumped me. Let me look it up. 1 second. Oh, I know this one. Tree of Heaven. Yeah. It's not in Chinese as Chao Chan. For foul-smelling tree. I could have written that. I would totally use it for a chop and drop. Yeah, I mean, something that's invasive as that stupid thing. Chop it down and use it. And the important part is not to let it go to seed. And of course, they do sucker too. So, you know, chop, drop, chop, drop. If it grows fast, chop it and drop it. You know, I like things that grow fast and grow back. Other people hate them. Like, I don't want it to keep growing back. You know, Well, if it keeps growing back, that means it's making biomass. It means it's pulling more minerals from the ground, and it's turning that into leaves and trunk, which you can then chop up and feed to other things. So, yes, I would use it as a chop and drop, no problem. Do it. Joe sends a super chat. Thank you, Joe. Says, David, your live streams are always a blast. Keep up the Irie vibes. Sending you the equivalent of 5 USD. Yes. MX is a crypto, isn't it? I've been into crypto lately, man. It's amazing. I want a crypto based on coffee beans. Like block grounds. But thank you very much for the super chat. Irie takes me back. When I was a teenager, I moved furniture for a thrift store that was in a neighborhood near Lauderdale Lakes. Lauderdale Hill, Florida, which had a lot of islanders living in the neighborhood. A lot of Jamaicans, a few other islands, a lot of Haitians. And there was a place where you could get the best Jamaican food they had the spicy meat pies, they had curry goat, red bean rice, salt fish, they had cow cod soup, goat head soup, all the good stuff, and ginger beer and the champagne cola, all the Jamaican stuff. So I would go down there on my lunch. It was called the Irie Bakery. Irie! And my friend Leroy, who was from Jamaica, would take me, we would go there, and Leroy and Eric, those were the name of the two guys that worked on the truck, and they thought it was entertaining to just say, hey rookie, you try this, rookie. You're a rookie, you try this? You like that? You're just gonna lick it up? And I'm like, well, I don't care, it looks good to me, man. And I would eat it, and then they would laugh, and I would find out what it was later, but I didn't really care. I was like, go ahead, soup, whatever. I don't care. It tasted good. It's nice and spicy. Drink a ginger beer with it. Oh, I would go back and get it, long after I was done with that job and I was working as a writer and other things. I would drive out to that area occasionally and go get some. I took my wife there when we were dating and tried to get her to try different soups, So, Irie takes me back. Thank you. Thank you, Carolyn, very much for the $2 tip. Tip for good information. Thank you. I like the hat. Where'd you get the guy with the hat? That's me. That's me, except I don't usually do that smile. I don't even know how to do that. Well, these guys showing off like, I ate an entire can of peanuts. I don't do that. I remember, it reminds me of something that Rodney Dangerfield said. Last time I saw a mouth like that, it had a hook in it. I'm like, yeah, don't like that. Whatever. Okay, Yam-based crypto. Oh, Yam coin. I like that. Let's start it, man. I mean, everybody's launching a crypto now. Liberty Not Licensed says, why would a pandemic affect coin supply if mint production remained constant? Well, I know that a lot of the mines got shut down and the supply lines got shut, but who knows? I don't really know. I invest in I invest in coins. You know those little ones that have the hole punched through the middle, made out of aluminum? Love those. Was Jamaican? That's right. It was Jamaican. Hugh says, my dear wife threw my clump of turmeric roots into the woods. I couldn't find it. I'm hoping it rooted and I can locate the plant. I hope I got your voice right, Hugh. That's ridiculous. Why? Ew, what is this thing? It's like all knobby and yellow. Ew! Throw off into the woods. Let's see here. I'm looking. I'm going to go through these other questions here and answer a few more of them. I think I got all the way to the bottom of the super chat, so let's see what else we got here. Chip says, my ginger in Arizona seems to do better with dappled sun most of the day. I have to water it a lot and give it rich, fertile, well-drained soil. Yes, I had the same thing in Florida. Ginger does great in the shade, not in the top. Lisa says, I appreciate your less rigid views of the food forest design, and you encourage plants for reasons other than for strictly food. I appreciate it. I love plants in general, so. And I think that it's going to work. Pretty much if you plant a bunch of plants together, eventually a system will evolve out of it. It's not that big a deal. All right, let's see. Thank you, Haley M. Much appreciated. Mar says, David, for a defensive hedge in 9B, is Pyracantha my best bet, and what would be good to co-plant with it? Pyracantha is a great hedge. Pyracantha is awesome, and you can also, the berries are marginally edible, and apparently you can graft loquats onto it. Now that's insane, isn't it? It's supposed to have a massively dwarfing effect on the loquats, but you could have Pyracantha on the outside of the hedge, and apparently some loquat branches growing to the inside. I had Pyracantha, I loved it. But the other one that I liked that grew even faster was Silverthorn. Elaeagnus pungens, I think. Elaeagnus pungens. Silverthorn hedge, I really, really liked. Very good defensive hedge as well. But Pyracantha is brutal. What would be good to co-plant with it? I would just plant a bunch of Pyracantha. You could also mix up, I mean, you could mix Pyracanthas and Silverthorn. In 9B, you probably couldn't get away with Bougainvillea because that would probably be the top. Vicious. Nasty. Nasty. Rick says, when is the olives and olives cover video? One of these days, I'll have to do a video on olives. So Boojangles asked about ginger. Does it prefer shade or full sun? In 8B, put it in the shade. Now, if you had less, if you have a less brutal climate, you can grow it in the sun, no problem. All right, let's see here. He says you got to check weapons at the door for that kind of party. Yeah, especially once I start passing around the the Jello shots made with Everclear, things get really interesting. Have some Jello. Let's see. Christ All in All says, love your channel, so much useful info. Well, I really appreciate it. I'm just having fun most of the time. Juan Gonzalez says, how about just tossing seed everywhere often? That's what I do. See what pops up. Yep, do it. I did a post a while ago where I just tilled up an area of ground quite a while ago in my old food forest, and I had this big mix of tree seeds and vegetable seeds and flower seeds, winged them across the ground just to see what happened. A lot of stuff pops up. It's so much fun. Though in Florida, the weeds tend to eat most of it before it does anything. Lisa Lee, look on my website for the soap nut tree and the nut. TheSurvivalGardener.com. Look up soap nut at TheSurvivalGardener.com. You'll see some. Going through here. I don't like apples. Persimmon I'll do. It's okay. I'm actually allergic to apples, so I understand. Mari says, can you graft multiple varieties of fruit under the same tree, like Granny Smith, Red Delicious, Golden Apple, etc., on crabapple rootstocks? Yes, so long as they're all Malus domestica, they're all apples, they all intergraft. All the apples intergraft. My friend Stephen Edholm, the Skill Cult channel here on YouTube, huge. A huge variety. He put like 50 different apples onto one tree. He would just take the ends of branches, cut them off, graft, cut them off, graft. But it gets harder if you get into some things don't graft across genus or connection, you know. Arch Enema is just like, dude, I don't understand, man. Are you having a nervous breakdown? I have no idea what's going on. I don't even know what the original argument was at. I just cut it all. Cut the whole thing out. All right. So I am going to go down to the end of the chats here and see if there's any new ones, and then I'm going to call this thing. Mars says, for pushing the zone, can a south-facing wall be just freestanding, or does it have to be the wall of an insulated building to be a good heat reservoir? It's better if it's the wall of an insulated building. It's if you were to have a wall and you mounded up soil behind it, that would help too. And if there's an overhang at the top of the wall, that helps a lot too, interestingly enough. Like the south-facing wall that I had, the overhang, basically everything underneath the overhang didn't freeze, but the stuff outside of it did. But the thermal mass is important. I thought about taking, like, if you made a wall of 55-gallon drums filled full of water, you could plant tropical trees next to them, and they would probably survive some freezing nights. Christina says, beware of seeds arriving unsolicited in the mail from China. It is happening everywhere in the U.S., and it is an attack on agriculture. Do not plant them. Report it to the local ag department. Yeah. I heard about that. It's very interesting. I don't know what's going on. I heard that the murder hornets came in from China, too. But I just wish that all the nations would stop fist fighting with each other all the time. It really doesn't make any sense. Everybody have your own space and stop punching each other, you know. Yeah, you could use rocks for thermal mass too. Water is the best, really, but rocks are not bad. But the thermal mass of water is incredible. Like, it takes a lot of effort for it to freeze. I wish somebody would send me free seeds. Oh, people have sent me free seeds in the mail. Well, guys, I'm going to call this thing. Thank you all. Thank you very much to the members. Thank you to Mars and Lou, MH, Joe, and Carolyn for the super chats today. And we'll be back again. I'm not going to be able to do this tomorrow. I have no idea what you're talking about silencing people, Arch. I don't understand what's going on. I mean, if you could get online and write me an email, that would help. But I don't have much time right now. But I would definitely read an email if you could get on somewhere. Karen says, I got 2 packages of the China seeds. That is bizarre. I just thought maybe there was a few sent. I didn't realize so many people were getting them. That's so weird. What interesting times we live in. But anyhow, I will... Oh, you want a song? All right, you're right. We need a song. Let's see here, 1 second. Let's see, we started with Glycerine. One second. Let's see if I can find this. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to find this one. This is a fun one. So much fun. So positive too. Nope. Don't have it. It looks like, you know, the copyright people pull down like everything. Let's see if I can do this. Love and hate, get it wrong. She cut me right back down the side. Sleep the day, let it fade. Who was there to take your place? No one knows, never will. Mostly me, but mostly you. What do you say? What do you do when it all comes down? I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. It's taking me all this time to find out what I need. Yeah, yeah. I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. It's taking me all this time. There is no blame, only shame when you beg and just complain. The more I try, the more I try. Oh, police are paranoid. So am I, so's the future. So are you, being creature. What do you say? What do you do when it all comes down? 'Cause I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. It's taking me all this time. It's taking me all this time to find out what I need. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. It's taking me all this time. Shoot up, 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 bop, bop, ba. Love and hate, get it wrong. She cut me right back down the side. Sleep the day, let it fade. Who was there to take your place? No one knows, never will. Could be me, it could be you. What do you say? What do you do when it all comes down? I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. It's taking me all this time to find out what I need. I don't wanna come back down from this cloud. It's taking me all this time. What do you come down from this cloud, from this cloud? That might make a good country song, come to think of it. Love and hate, get it wrong. It's almost the same as a country song. Alright, guys. Get me right back downstairs. Whoa. Well, you have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Danny, for that final little snuck-in super chat. Millions of peaches. All right. Have a great night. Yes, Mars says, have you been taking voice lessons from Moira, the fellow Castalia House author? Yes, I took voice lessons from Moira Grayland. She's very, very talented. She's very, very good. So have a great rest of the day, and thanks for watching. And until next time, as always, may your thumbs always be green.